So tomorrow is April 22nd, and tomorrow is?
Earth Day.
It's also Katina here. But yes, it's Earth. It's Earth Day. I love Earth Day. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of Earth Day. Some of you weren't even born yet. How many people were not born before 1970 in this room? Okay. So how many people celebrated Earth Day in school, doing different things? It's the one reason I stayed teaching. I'm telling you, it absolutely saved everyone at school because everyone got so excited about this. So, interestingly enough, Earth Day started in 1970. I'm sure I was not aware of that in central Alberta in 1970. Recycling was not a word we knew in 1970 in central Alberta. The height of counterculture in the United States, 1970, brought the death of Jimi Hendrix, the last Beatles album, and Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. War raged in Vietnam, and students nationwide overwhelmingly opposed it. At the time, Americans and Canadians, and likely some Europeans, I remember this, were slurping leaded gas through vats of V8 sedans. Cars then were big. Trucks were big. And it was V8 engines, and it was just, we're using leaded gas. Industry belched out smoke and sludge with little fear of legal consequences or bad press. Air pollution was commonly accepted as the smell of prosperity. That's how we viewed it in Alberta. Right on. Environment, this is funny, was a word that appeared more often in spelling bees on the evening news. That tripped up a few of us. Although mainstream America largely remained oblivious to environmental concerns, the stage had been set for change by the publication of Rachel Carson's New York Times bestseller, Silent Spring. This is a book I haven't read yet. I'm embarrassed to say this. It was written in 1962, but I think I'll sponsor a copy for the Abbey. This is like a land-breaking, mind-breaking, really important book. Earth Day 1970 gave voice to that emerging consciousness, channeling the energy of the anti-war protest movement and putting environmental concerns on the front page of all newspapers. When Earth Day was first created in 1970, it rode the coattails of a decade filled with social activism. Voting rights were strengthened, civil rights were outlined, and women were demanding equal treatment. But there was no Environmental Protection Agency in 1970. There was no Clean Air Act. There was no Clean Water Act. Fast forward 48 years, and what started as a grassroots movement has exploded into an international day of attention and activism dedicated to preserving the environment. And this is great. You'll love this. Officially, tomorrow, for the first time, the United Nations recognizes this upcoming April 22nd day as International Mother Earth Day. So, as spiritual practitioners, as monastics, we all have a role to play in this. This is not just for, some people out there. This is every single individual. I found a talk that His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. What he says that year, you could imagine him saying tomorrow. It echoes the same kinds of thinking that's going on this year. So he says, as the 20th century draws to a close, we find that the world has grown smaller. The world's peace have become the world's people have become almost one community. Political and military alliances have created large multinational groups. Industry and international trade have produced a global economy. Worldwide communications are eliminating ancient barriers of distance, language, and race. Now remember, in 1992, the internet was just barely. Was it even going? Just barely, right? I think it really cranked into gear in 1990. We're also being drawn together by the grave problems we face of overpopulation, dwindling natural resources, and an environmental crisis that threatens our air, water, and trees. along with a vast number of beautiful life forms that are the very foundation of existence on this small planet that we share. Interdependence, of course, is a fundamental law of nature. All phenomena, from the planet we inhabit to the oceans, clouds, forests, and flowers that surround us, arise in dependence upon subtle patterns of energy. Without their proper interaction, they dissolve and decay. He says we need to appreciate this fact of nature far more than we have in the past. Our ignorance of it is largely directly responsible for many of the problems we face today. For instance, tapping the limited resources of our world, particularly those of developing nations, simply to fuel consumerism is disastrous. If it continues unchecked, eventually we all suffer. We are suffering, and we'll continue to suffer. We must respect the delicate matrix of life and allow it to replenish itself. The United Nations Environment Programs warn, I'm told, that we're facing the most massive wave of extinction in 65 million years. This fact is profoundly frightening. It must open our minds to the immense proportions of the crisis we face. That was 1992. This beautiful planet of ours, His Holiness says, is a delightful habitat. Its life is our life. Its future is our future. Indeed, the earth acts like a mother to us all. Like children, we are dependent on her. In the fact of such global problems as the greenhouse effect and the depletion of many layers of the ozone, individual organizations and single nations are helpless. Unless we all work together, no solution can be found. Our Mother Earth is teaching us a lesson in universal responsibility. So now fast forward to last fall, September 2017. The Abbey, at that point, first learned that there's a proposed smelter for the Newport, Washington area. It is going to smelt silicone. We had no idea prior to that, but the talks had been going on for quite some time. So I'm going to read you part of the press release that has some people, hopefully very few, very excited about this project. Last year, High Test Sand announced plans to build a $325 million silicon smelter in Northeast Washington. State and local officials hail the project as a big win for the economically depressed rural region. About 150 people are expected to work at the smelter, making high-grade silicon for use in solar panels and computer chips. That's their ace in the deck. Average wages are projected in the $70,000 range. We know that's not true. Most of the work will be done by shift workers who are making maybe $17 an hour. There'll be a handful of people who are at the management level making maybe that range of income. This is the sad part. The smelter has qualified as a project of statewide significance. So it was eligible for $300,000 in state assistance from the Washington Department of Commerce. The High Test Silicon people, the owners, anticipate opening this place up in September of 2019. So since that time, the Abbey has been going to meetings, we've been doing research, we've been writing letters, we've been getting our letters published in a number of places. What's really, really heartwarming is that sleepy little Newport, with a population of about 2,200 people, is rallying against this. Many, many groups have formed. Many people are writing letters and just trying to figure out what's going on. High Test Sand has revealed very little, just the bare minimum. We're neighbors with the Kalispel tribe of Indians, and they have a fabulous program. There's a sector in their tribe which focuses on natural resources and the environment, and the lead person there is Dean Osterman, and he's been in this capacity of monitoring the environment and doing research with his team for about 25 years now. And they are putting forth very clear, concise, well-researched documents to, hand to everyone involved and to hand out to the decision makers on this. I thought you might be interested to hear a few pieces of some of the letters that we've written. We've relied on the Kalispel tribe for research. We've looked in other places trying to figure out how to communicate our heartfelt concern in a respectful way, but also communicating the fact that this thing is going to produce a lot of pollution. And if you do any reading at all on the internet, you already know that the planet can't withstand any more production of greenhouse gas. And this silicone smelter, which is slated to be built 11 miles away from the Abbey, in the heart of Pend d'Oreille County, is going to produce massive amounts of pollution. So we sent out our letters to the governor and many, many people. Here's how some of our letters have sounded. After months of attending meetings, reading, researching, and asking questions, we, the monastics at Sravasti Abbey, are joining with the many voices in Newport, Pend d'Oreille County, Bonners County, the Kalispel tribe of Indians, and others who are opposed to the proposed high-test sand silicon smelter. We who live in Pend d'Oreille County live in a place of beauty. So if you've been to the Abbey, you know this is true. If you're planning to come, you will discover that this is true. Families with deep roots and families who are newcomers live here seeking harmony with nature and with their neighbors. A 40-acre industrial plant with its pollution, noise, lighting, and traffic is an affront to the values that we hold most dear. We understand the allure of creating 150 jobs in a county with 6.4% unemployment. Definitely we understand the position of the commissioners. They're desperate to try and find ways of boosting the economy here. The county is really in desperate need of something. Why does it have to be this? However, the reports about the kinds of jobs that will be created by the proposed smelter are not that high in the pay scale. And then a small number of high-paying jobs will be gained by professionals who will have to move here from somewhere else. One of the people who lives in Newport went to visit a similar smelter in Burnsville, and he interviewed some people who have worked at that facility. And these poor people who get these jobs are working in conditions that are frightful, really. They're working in situations where the room is more than 100 degrees. It can go up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It's shift work. Most of the people don't last more than a few months. The work is just too hard. Not worth it and dangerous. We're concerned about air quality. From a global perspective, the silicon smelter will become one more contributor to greenhouse gases, accelerating the onset of climate change. Now, this is right from high-test sand's declaration of what they are predicting will be emitted from the smelter. Who knows if this is accurate? Who knows if this is even in the range? But this is what they are admitting to. The smelter will generate 320,000 tons of greenhouse gases, 760 tons of sulfur dioxide, and 700 tons of nitrogen oxide each year. Now, this next piece is from the Kalispel Indian tribe and their research. All of that, which does not include all the vehicles that are going to be bringing the raw material to the facility, this is roughly equivalent to the amount of greenhouse gas produced by 65,000 cars driving 11,000 miles each through the streets of Newport each year. And the amount of sulfur dioxide generated is like having 165,000 wood-burning stoves burning continuously for 365 days of the year on 1 acre of land. That's what they're admitting to. Then, of course, there's a concern about water. The plant in Burnsville uses 250,000 gallons of water per day. Things have to be continually kept wet. There's all this process for cooling things. At one point, high-test sand wrote a letter to the city of Newport in January asking for that same amount of water. In a meeting that some of us went to in September of 2017, they told us that they were asking for 300 gallons of water per day. They asked the city for 250,000 gallons of water per day. The city of Newport said, no, we can't do it. And then they said, well, actually, we think what we need is 9,000 gallons of water per day. It's quite a range. What's actually going to be needed? Here's the important part, and this is again from the research that the Kalispel Indian tribe has done. The property that is designated for this smelter straddles two watersheds, the Little Spokane and the Pend Oreille watershed. The Little Spokane watershed is already an over-allocated water system that has to go on water rationing at certain times of the year. So the source of water, if they're going to be drilling wells, are they going to get that amount from that property? It's a big mystery. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's the transportation of all this raw material. The silica rock is going to be trucked down from Golden, BC. One of the things they need to create this huge heat, including this huge amount of electricity that they need to run this plant, which is why they're in Washington State. Washington State has the lowest electricity rates of almost anywhere, is they need to burn wood chips and coal to produce this huge heat in these furnaces that reach 300 degrees Fahrenheit. 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, they're saying they're going to use this kind of coal called blue gem coal. It's found in two places in the world. One place is in Kentucky, the other place is in Colombia. They'll have to train it from Kentucky. Kentucky's about 3,000 miles from here. If they get it from Colombia, they'll have to put it on a boat and then get to some port on this country and then train it to Newport. There's massive, massive research done on the effects of transporting coal in trains. They don't cover train cars with coal. It's simply economically not even feasible. So the Sierra Club has done a huge amount of research on this. I'll just read you a couple of points, because this talk is getting a bit long now. This is what they've found. Trains, trucks, and marine vessels hauling coal release toxic air pollutants, including nitrogen oxide and particulate matter into the air, primarily through diesel exhaust. That's how it happens. Health effects of nitrogen oxide and these particulate matters are linked to stunted lung development and hospital admissions for potentially fatal cardiac rhythm disturbances. The particulate matter that's released as they truck and train this stuff is of really big concern because it also increases the probability of hospital admission for heart attacks, heart diseases, and congestive heart failure. Coal trains are often over a mile long, and they take 5 to 7 minutes to clear road crossings. So increased coal train traffic can leave emergency vehicles stranded behind trains. Some of the coal dust that leaves the coal trains will enter the service system water, degrading the water quality. So the list of things that are disadvantages with this proposed smelter are extensive. Everyone at the Abbey is really behind, making our voices heard. The Kalispel tribe is behind making our voices heard. And we'll continue working, to try and get the attention of the people who are the decision makers to say, hey, you know what? This is not the route that we want to take. Yes, we want economic feasibility for this whole county. There are many, many other ways of achieving that goal. So in conclusion, this is how we ended one of our letters. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, spiritual leader and recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, reminds us, I am wholly convinced that if all of us do not make a concerted effort with a sense of universal responsibility, we will see the progressive breakdown of the fragile ecosystems that support us, resulting in an irreversible and irrevocable degradation of our planet Earth. So let's celebrate Earth Day every day, but especially tomorrow since it's called Mother Earth Day, and do our best to really reduce our impact on planet Earth and do our best to be informed and be an inspiration to others.